Hello, parents, family members, caregivers. Dr. John McNaught, talking about self-determination at home. And today, this video, we're going to explore competence, establishing competence. And so, just as a quick reminder, this is the second video of the series. But a quick reminder: everything is on our website. Tons of resources for educators, parents, and youth, all free, including hundreds of videos of parents, youth, and educators all talking about the importance of and their experiences with self-determination. So in the last video, we talked again about the elements of I'm determined, choice-making, decision-making, problem-solving, etc. In here, we talked about the establishment of the continuum of these behaviors, right? So choice-making, decision-making, problem-solving are the skills that lead to the abilities of goal setting and self-advocacy, self-regulation, which then lead to the beliefs that you can achieve things, you can control your what happens to you, you've got what you need to succeed, and you're aware of your own strengths and limitations. And so, as we talked about in the previous video, the elements of I'm determined, right? When paired with autonomy, competence, and relatedness in the environment, lead to successful outcomes for students with disabilities and lead to those self-determined behaviors. So in the previous video, we talked about autonomy. In this video specifically, we're going to talk about the importance of competence. So competence, what is it? What does it look like? And how do we foster it specifically at home? So what is it? It's the feeling of having the skills needed for success. So it means you believe you have the ability and the skills to succeed at whatever task you're working on. And so, for instance, for me, if my car broke down, my competence level in my ability to fix the car on the side of the road is 0. Okay, I am not a mechanic. And so that would be something I would need help with, right? So what are the elements of I'm determined that foster competence? Self-efficacy, self-advocacy, self-awareness, and problem solving. Now, you'll note that problem solving was also part of the autonomy competence, and that's true. A lot of these elements from I'm determined are found in each of those core areas. We're going to talk a lot today about self-advocacy, self-awareness, and problem solving. So how do we do this? What are some things that we can do as parents, as caregivers, as family members to help develop this competence or support the idea of competence in our son or daughter? So we talk a lot about specific positive feedback. So as a former special education teacher, the research says, you're supposed to have 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction. And so I remember hearing that for the first time, 15, 20 years ago as a special education teacher, and thinking for sure, I was probably 15 to 1 on the positive side, and prided myself on that. And then this will date me a little bit, but I remember taking out the VHS recorder and recording a lesson and watching it and being shocked to realize that I was certainly not 15 to 1. I wasn't even 5 to 1. I was more like maybe 1 to 1. And so it really made me sit back and think about, A, the importance of specific positive feedback, but B, that it's harder than you think. And so, parents, think about when you're giving your son or daughter feedback, how often is it positive? The other key word here is specific. And so if I'm just running around my house saying, good job, good job, good job, my kids are looking at me like, what are you talking about? Good job for what? My kid could have just slipped the dog some food under the table and I'm saying good job about something else, but I'm not being specific. And so things like, hey, great job cleaning your room. It looks awesome. Or thank you for putting those dishes away. You did a great job. I really appreciate you helping out the family, right? Tying the behavior, the specific positive feedback to the actual behavior that they did. Opportunities to respond. And so giving in a classroom environment, what does this look like, right? So it looks like you ask a question as a teacher, and then if you don't make any accommodations, most often it's the kid who's the fastest processor always gets the opportunity to respond. And that can lead to negative self-esteem for everyone else who can't process that fast, right? And so at home, when you need something done, when there's a question, giving your son or daughter the opportunity to respond to that question or help solve the problem or help solve the issue. Taking a breath and realizing that you don't have to solve everything. Ask for some input. And then the theme you'll hear through all three of these videos is opportunities to practice, right? No one becomes competent in anything without practice. And so understanding that allowing time for practice takes time, right? And so as I talked about in the previous video, I get everyone's living a busy life. My two daughters are a year apart. And so life gets hectic. My wife and I both work full time. But we build in opportunities to practice skills. And so do I do it every single night? Absolutely not, because we just don't have time, right? But do I make sure it's a priority? Absolutely. And so whether that's, having them plan and then help cook a meal, right? That's building the helping, the choosing the meal is the autonomy piece, right? The helping you cook it is the beginning of the competence piece. And then also helping you clean everything up. Now look, I can't do that every night. We'll be eating dinner at 10 o'clock every night. But there are nights where that's what we do. One tool that we'll specifically talk about through Undetermined is the good day plan. And this will kind of, again, a great introduction to building the foundation for competence. So before I show you that good day plan, I want to show you two videos, one a student perspective and one a parent perspective. And then we'll talk about that a little bit through the use of the good day plan.
There are parents who don't want their son or daughter to think that they have a disability. And there are some teachers who think, I don't want Bob to know that he has a disability.
Well, the kids have every right to know as the parents and everybody else. The kids, if they don't know, they're going to just be like, why are they doing this to me? Why am I not being treated like everybody else? As soon as you know, the easier it is to cope with everything. At first it's like as a shock in a way, but then after you understand and know and learn a little bit more about your disability, you turn it from a disability to a different ability. So it just depends on how you want to tell them. It's just not don't tell them. You have to tell them.
Do you think kids know that they have a disability, even if nobody's told them anything?
You can tell. For me, when everybody else, when we were just starting to learn how to read, was taking it and going with it, and I was sitting there I don't know how to do this. I'm struggling. I don't know what I need to do. And even to I could tell from the beginning that something was wrong. Even my mom could tell something was wrong, and they just kept saying that I was just wanting to learn and stuff. So, I could definitely tell something was wrong, and I'm pretty sure other people can tell.
And how did that make you feel to know something was going on but not know what it was?
It was horrible. It's like when you're sick, you can go to the doctor and get a remedy for it, but when it's like that, you can tell your parents, you can tell your teachers, but until someone actually listens to you and follows up on it, it's hard. You just kind of feel like you're in your own little box and no one understands what you're going through.
So that was Ethan, and I think in all my years doing this, I've heard Ethan's story over and over and over again. So Ethan was diagnosed in third grade, and no one ever actually told him he had a disability until he was a freshman in high school. And so he spent, pretty much K through 8th grade thinking he was broken, thinking he was stupid, thinking something was wrong. And, imagine his relief when he realized he wasn't broken, he wasn't stupid, he just learned differently. And so I know for some parents this is a hot topic, but I can't stress enough the importance of talking to your son or daughter at an early age about their disability. Disability is not a dirty word, and we need to change that narrative. And when I say talk about your disability, again, I'm not saying come from a deficit-based approach, right? Say something like, hey, this is you've got a learning difference or physical difference. This is what it's called, but more importantly, this is what it means. So these are some things that you're really good at, and these are some things that you're going to struggle with. And we need to come up with some ways, some accommodations, so that we can level the playing field, because you can be as successful as anybody else. And something as simple as that, I can't tell you how far that goes. So let's hear from a parent real quick.
It looks like one big bowl of spaghetti out there for some students. And to sort out the important things from the minutia, they're not often able to do that, like with Mimi. She needs help to focus on what's the important kernel here that I'm trying to achieve. So we got to keep on reminding ourselves, what is the purpose and goal here? It's very difficult sometimes, particularly if you're starting to interpret it as lazy or I don't want to do it, when really they want to be successful, but they've experienced so much failure that they can get turned off and it's over, school's over.
So I really appreciate Jim's perspective there, because I think a lot of times, students who are not feeling competent, right? Your son or daughter is not feeling competent, and they're frustrated, and that can get translated or perceived as they're giving a lack of effort or they're lazy. And in reality, they're working 3 times or 300 times as hard as everybody else, and it's taking 100 times longer than everybody else. And so I think you'll hear Annie allude to it in one of the videos about, she's a young lady with a disability and had 2 siblings who did not have disabilities. And sometimes, the parents comparing all 3 of them, and how it just made her feel bad. And so it's important to understand that, it's not laziness. It's not, it's not, they don't care. It's frustration, and it's exhaustion from trying so hard a lot of the times. Right. And so this matches kind of perfectly with Ethan's piece about, hey, the student needs to have an understanding, right, of their disability to help make sense of why everything is taking so much longer or so much harder than what they perceive their peers going through. And so one way to do this is a good day plan. And again, this is a great just foundational piece. And again, I recommend everyone in the family do it. So just like the one-pager, I have a good day plan. My wife has a good day plan. My kids have a good day plan. And it's really quite simple. What happens on a good day? Does it happen now? What needs to happen to make it a good day? And who can help me? And so this does a couple things. One, it helps get the conversation going of what does your son or daughter consider to be a good day? And I always have, kids always ask me, well, can I do a Saturday? Well, sure. If you want to do a Saturday first and then do like a Monday, that will be fine, right? So we can get in that picture of what's a good day look like on the weekend and what's a good day look like at school. And does it happen now is just this perceptive piece, right? You might think everything is happening until you read your son or daughter's plan. And they're like, no, actually it's not happening. And then what needs to happen to make it a good day? And this is the discussion point, right? So this is where autonomy and competence come together. So you're not going to solve this for them. You're going to discuss with them. All right, well, what needs to make it happen? So what happens on a good day is, I get up on time for school. Does it happen now? Sometimes. What needs to happen to make it a good day? This is when, the kid says, well, maybe I need to get an alarm clock and set my own alarm so I'm not relying on anyone else to wake me up. And then who can help me? They can put down parent as someone who can, be the backup to the alarm or help remind them to set the alarm. I can remember my daughter in second grade asking for an alarm clock. I just thought, well, sure, that's a great idea. And up until then, and again, I've been working on self-determination for over 20 years, and I was the guy going upstairs waking my kids up instead of, teaching them to be independent and doing it themselves. And so, you've just got to kind of think of all these natural opportunities that can present themselves. So let's look at an actual, Betsy is our guinea pig again. And so Betsy likes to get at least 9 hours of sleep. Does it happen now? Mostly. What needs to happen, get off my phone when I'm in bed. And so, not being on social media till all hours of the night. And so you can see how Betsy kind of progresses through the day and has a plan in place if things go wrong. And so I think one of the big pieces here is understanding that if something starts to go wrong, we can stop it, we can reassess, and we can fix the day. And, think about how many times, you've had a bad morning and you've let that bad morning dictate your whole day. I know I've done it myself. My wife was a special education teacher at a high school for 15 years, and she had her good day plan posted on her board. And, one of her things was, make sure she had coffee in the morning. And so she was driving to school one day. She was late. She spilled her coffee all over herself, and she came into her first period class, obviously with a little bit of a bad attitude. She didn't have her coffee. She stained her pants, just basically not happy. And she was starting to teach her class, and she had her good day plan posted on the board, and everyone had theirs posted. And one of the kids stopped her and said, I think you need to reference your good day plan because something is definitely wrong, and you need to readjust your attitude. And, while funny, right, it kind of made her realize that if I don't readjust some things, I'm going to set myself up for an awful day. And so we're going to talk a little bit here. We'll hear from Caden, Annie, and Betsy again, and then we'll kind of discuss trends through their 3 videos on parent involvement specific to establishing competence.
So something that my mom that I really appreciate that she did was that she advocated for me when I didn't have the strength to do so. Even though in my younger ages, that is an awesome thing for her to do, she was able to back off when she felt like it was the time for myself to be able to do it. And this was really important for myself, learning how to grow up and be able to be on my own more. And especially like when I'm going off to college, being able to learn and see how I can advocate for myself, and I can make sure that I'm going to do something for myself that people will understand. And I thank her so much for being able to do that. And yeah.
Okay, and let's hear from Betsy.
So for me, my parents, when they helped me become more attentive in my learning, my IEP meetings, is they made me show up. They made me come. They made me sit there and understand what was going on. And actually, one day, my parents and I sat down and we read my whole IEP and what everything meant, what everything understands. So if I knew if a teacher was new or they didn't know me, I knew exactly what my accommodations were and how they had to be brought out and what classroom I needed to go to and what teacher I needed to see. And if something happened, I would tell the teacher, no, in my IEP, it says I have to do this. And so that's how my parents actually helped me become more self-advocating for myself, is they actually sat down and we read the whole IEP together, even though it took forever. We read the whole IEP together, both my mom and dad and I, and that helped me understand actually my disability more and what it meant and what this IEP means and what do I need to get out of it to help me succeed better. I don't think anything that my parents could have done. I think they did everything right, actually, and growing with me through school and making my school life easier, even though it was already harder. I think they did everything right. So.
And lastly, we'll hear from Annie.
Hey parents, so some things that my parents did while I was in middle high school, to help me build some skills to be successful was pushing me to talk to my case manager. Before my mom would solve a problem, she would be like, well, have you talked to your case manager? I'd be like, no. She's like, well, then go talk to your case manager. So that was one thing that was, I never really wanted to do, but, she pushed me to do that. And she also encouraged me to make sure, when I had problems that I was trying to solve them myself instead of just solving them, behind the scenes. Some things that I wish my parents would have done, was explain my disability to me before, middle school and before I was a part of I'm Determined. I also wish I would have attended IEP meetings earlier. I think they're really important. I mean, it's a meeting all about me. I love people talking about me, so I would love to be there. And I also wish that my parents kind of pushed me to take advanced classes in high school. I think that I was at the point where I could have been successful in them with a little bit of support and nudge to do them.
So let's break those down a little bit on some thoughts here. First, opportunities to practice. So they each talked about, their parents pushing them to practice self-determined behaviors by solving problems by themselves. So by advocating, talking to their case manager, talking to their teachers when things weren't going well. Now look, that doesn't mean as a parent you're going to completely step away, right? You're going to help them form a plan, push them to go implement the plan. And if it doesn't work, right, you're going to reassess. And if you have to get involved, you have to get involved. But the key here being is that your first reaction is not to jump in and go solve the problem. Again, the earlier students can practice these behaviors, the better. And so I can remember my oldest daughter was in 5th grade, and she wanted to, she was in the second highest spelling group, and she wanted to be in the highest spelling group. And she kept complaining to me about how she wasn't in the highest spelling group. And I said, well, talk to your teacher. And I wasn't any more specific than that. So this is a learning experience for me. We talk about failure, right? And so I said, talk to your teacher. And she said, well, okay. And so the next day I get an email from our teacher that says, Dr. McNaught, Chloe tells me that you would like her to be in the highest spelling group. And, basically wanted to tell me what she was currently working on and why she wasn't yet in the highest spelling group. And I just looked at her and laughed after I read it. Because I said, well, why did you tell your teacher I wanted you to be in your highest spelling group? And her response was, well, I thought it would work. And so, I needed to be a little bit more specific. So I should have said something like, well, why don't you talk to your teacher and make a plan, right, on things you need to accomplish or achieve so that you can get access to the higher spelling group. So again, opportunities to practice. The second one that we talked about a lot already is that disability awareness piece. I can't stress this enough. Disability is not a dirty word, okay? We need to have those conversations with our children about what their strengths are, what they're going to struggle with, what might take longer, what's going to take more effort than others, but it is not an indictment on how smart they are. And so, if you get anything from this video in particular, the disability awareness piece is huge. And what I found is, especially in elementary school, early elementary school, everyone is so inclusive, right? Everyone's so accepting of differences, and the more we can be comfortable with ourselves and our differences and our similarities of elementary school, the greater the chance that those beliefs and acceptance is going to flow into middle and high school. I think, for a lot of the students I've worked with, they didn't really start to struggle until 4th, 5th, 6th grade, when things got a little bit faster pace and you moved from learning to read to reading to learn. And so, they didn't truly understand their disability, and they started feeling shame around it. And shame is, the antithesis of competence. And so, having those conversations early and making it a strength-based conversation. You're going to address what the limitations are, but, there's also strengths involved as well. And then high expectations with scaffolded support, right? So that's another theme we're going to be talking about throughout. No one rises to low expectations. And I've met thousands of kids in my years working with this project, and it is so true. And the most amazing students I've met have had one major thing in common, and it's that parents had high expectations. They provided support when needed, and they pulled away when needed, but they always believed that their son or daughter could do whatever they wanted to do. And so, you're not always going to have educators that share that same belief, and I understand that, and that's disappointing. But I tell people all the time, a school day is 6 hours long, and the other 18 they're with you. And so, pushing those high expectations, providing those opportunities to practice, and preaching that disability is not a dirty word are the foundational pieces of building competence in your son or daughter. All right, that wraps up our second video. Thank you for your time, and we'll talk about relatedness next.